Now, we are in James chapter 5, verse 5. James is writing to the dispersed Jews after the persecution, and we are in this paragraph that starts with James 5:1 and goes down through James 5:6. Let's read the verse first, and then we'll read it in context. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. That was King James Version. Let's read this in context. James 5:1 through 5:6. Reading King James Version, quote, Go to now, ye rich men. Weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh, as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers, who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts, as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he does not resist you. Unquote. Now that's James 5, verse 1 through 6, and we're looking at James 5:5. Quote, Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts, as in a day of slaughter. Unquote. Now, let's take a look at this in other versions of the Bible, the particular verse that we're looking at right now. Reading from the ESV, or the English Standard Version. Quote, Ye have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgency. Ye have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. Unquote. Now let's read this in the Young's Literal Translation. Quote, Ye have lived in luxury upon the earth, and were wanton. Ye did nourish your hearts, as in a day of slaughter. Unquote. I think we're pretty well understanding this verse. So let's go into the Greek and parse this out and see what James is trying to communicate. Ye have lived in pleasure. Now let's take a look at that Greek word and see that it's only been used one time in the entire Greek New Testament this way, and it's done by James here. So let's go and see what the parsing of this Greek word is. It's written in the aorist tense, so it's written in regards mostly to the action of the verb, not in regards to past, present, or future tense. It's in the active voice, so this represents the subject as the doer, the performer of the action, and it's in the indicative mood, which is basically stating a fact. So, ye have lived in pleasure. You'll see what the definition of this is to help give us an understanding. Ye live deliciously, live luxuriously, be given to soft and luxurious life. Now, that's the definition of this Greek word. So James is throwing no punches here. He's just putting it out in total embellishment to help you understand what and to whom he's talking to. Ye have lived in pleasure. Let's continue. On the earth, and been wanton. Now let's look at this Greek word that's used for been wanton. It's used one time in the entire Greek New Testament. The understanding of it, let's look at the definition of it. The definition of been wanton is a person that gives himself to pleasure. He lives a luxurious life, gives oneself to pleasure. Okay, so that's what been wanton means. We never would have guessed. Let's go ahead and parse this out. Aorist tense, so it's written in regards of the action, not into the time frame of past, present, and future. Active voice, so it's talking about you being the performer, the doer of the action. And indicative mood, which is stating the fact. So continuing on the earth and been wanton, ye have nourished. Now let's take a look at this Greek word and find out what it means. James uses it one time, and he's the only person that does so in the entire Greek New Testament. Parsing it out, it's written in the aorist tense, so it's in regard to the action of the verb, not in regards to time, past, present, future. Active voice, so you're the doer of the action here. And indicative mood, it's just stating a fact. Ye have nourished. So let's take a look at this definition of the word, and let's see how it's used in this particular verse. Okay, in this particular verse, this Greek word's definition is to fatten. Now this is important because there's other ways that this is used. It's used in other verses as to nourish, support, to feed. Others as to give and suck. Others to bring up and nurture. But in this particular one, the definition of this is to fatten. Okay, so that's not a very good connotation here. Now, let's continue. Ye have nourished your hearts, as in a day of slaughter. So let's take a look at that Greek word used for a slaughter. Let's see what the meaning of it is. It is used in the Greek New Testament only once, and it is here. So let's take a look at the definition of this word. And the definition of the Greek word of slaughter is it's equivalent to the day of destruction. So continuing on in the Greek, that's the very last word here in the Greek. So let's move on. I'm going to give you my rendition of this verse. I think it's very important that when a person is looking at Scripture, he sees, can he relate to any of this that God has already put him through and walked him through? Let me tell you a little bit about what this means to me. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Now let me tell you, the one thing that I know about being extraordinarily materialistic, living in a museum home and having all the money you could want and doing all the fanciful things. You have lived in pleasure on the earth. Those things that you buy, those experiences that you go through, they're empty. Once everybody knows what you've bought or what you've done, you can't brag anymore. You got to go out and get something else so you can brag about that and tell your friends and make yourself sound important. And then that goes away almost as fast as everybody hears it. So then you got to top that. It's a never-ending cycle. And if it's material things, you're constantly worried about someone breaking in and stealing all your trophies that you bragged about to everybody, and you're going to look terrible if someone does. Or you need to get rid of them, but you don't dare sell them because you don't want people to think that you're broke and need the money. You're worried about your reputation. You're worried about fire breaking out and burning down your whole home and all your possessions. You're worried about breaking things. $1,000 vase, you drop it and break it. Cat hits it and it shatters into pieces. I'm talking from experience. These are things that means this. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. All this stuff that you do, it's going to take no time at all to get rid of it. Now, I did see when my loved one died, I did see that it took months, several months, for everything to be picked through by family members, sold off by the IRS, and all sorts of great stuff. And then there was basically, if you didn't take pictures or was lucky enough to get a few things, you had nothing for memories. Nothing. And you knew exactly the destiny of that person. You knew it. I knew it. In hell. unless through the grace and the mercy of God at the last hour that I was not there, and something took place that I do not know. And I pray and hope to God, but I do not know. But I do know the life before, and it wasn't a good one. So you have nourished your hearts for your ego, as in a day of slaughter, because your death is going to come upon you quickly. We slaughtered animals on the farm, and it was quick. Now let's see what John Gill, commentary on the Bible, has to say about this. Quote, "Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth." This is said of other rich men, for all that is here said is not to be understood as the same individuals, but some things of one and some of another. Some made no use of their riches, either for themselves or for others. Some did make use of them, and employed the poor, and then would not give them their wages. And others lived in a luxurious life, indulged themselves in carnal lusts and pleasures, gratified their senses by eating, drinking, gaming, and so were dead while they lived. The phrase suggests that their pleasures were but short-lived, but for a season, even while they were on earth, and that hereafter they would not live in pleasure. Quote, "But been wanting," unquote, through the abundancy and plenty of good things, their delicious way of living, and the swing of pleasures which they took, the allusions is to fattened beasts, which being in good pastures grow fat and waxen. Quote, "Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter," unquote. When beasts were slain for some extraordinary entertainment, or for their solemn feasts and sacrifices, the Jews, when they lived more deliciously than at other times, and then the sense is that these rich men fared sumptuously every day. Every day was a festival with them. They indulged themselves in intemperancy. They ate and drank, not merely what was necessary and satisfying and cheering to nature, but to excess, and gorged, and filled themselves in an extravagant manner. The Syriac version, instead of hearts, reads bodies, and one copy reads your flesh. And the last phrase may be rendered as it is in the same version, as unto, or for the day of slaughter. And so, the Arabic version, ye have nourished your hearts, as fattened for the day of slaughter. Like beasts that are fattened in order to be killed, so were they preparing and fitting up by their sins for destruction. Now this verse reminds me of one of the sins that people have. And in this one, this is pretty self-destructive. This is a problem that the person has with themselves. So instead of judging them for what they have purchased, pray for them in a positive manner. Don't point your finger at them like the devil does, especially in prayer. But pray for them and ask God to help them draw closer to Him, to walk with Him, to see the shallowness of things. Pray for them in a positive manner. Tell them Jesus loves them. Do not think that they're so materialistic and so sinful that they want nothing to do with God. Pursue them and pray for them. Thank you for listening to Discovering the Scriptures. May God richly bless you as you study and walk through the Bible.